Okay, so to get started with the Notion API, there's really a couple things that we'll need to do. First and foremost, you're going to need a Notion account or a Notion workspace. So go ahead and create one of those if you haven't. And once you get in here, by the way, you can make that completely free, so you don't have to pay for anything. We're going to create an integration. And this is kind of the secret sauce for allowing you to hook up to the Notion API. Sounds like the music is better now. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, so this API is really the secret sauce, allowing you to connect to the API. It gives you that authorization token. So if I go over, I actually already have this pulled up, my integrations. I created this integration, I just called it Lee's Notion, and it gives me this token that allows me to securely connect with the Notion API as myself. So you can fill this out, give it a name, give it some image, and for the demo that we're doing today, this is just going to be an internal integration. Still a little loud. I'll turn it down a little bit more. Let me know if that's even better. I don't want the music to be too overpowering, so just let me know. So we have this Notion API. We have this token. So click on show. I'm going to change this afterwards, so don't worry if I'm exposing this on the screen. But you can copy this token after creating your API and put it in your application. So if I go inside of a brand new Next.js application, and you can just run npx create next app and then name it whatever you want, something like this. This will spin up a brand new Next.js application. And if we take a look at our folder structure over here, I've already done this just to set things up ahead of time. And you have a .env file that we're going to create. So .env.local. And what this file does is it allows you to put in some environment variables, so some secret values or non-secret values that you can access through something like process.env.notion API key. Now, when we deploy this application, we'll also make sure we add these environment variables to Vercel or wherever you want to deploy your application. But this allows you to access these locally. So we grabbed our secret from our integration and we dropped it in this env.local. And the other thing we need to do is actually give our document access to communicate with our integration. So I have this My Library page, and it's pretty straightforward. It just has a database here with one entry. And if I go up to share, I can actually give permission to specific things inside of this library. So let's say I want to say, let's share this with Lee's Notion, right? We want to make sure that they have access to this page. That's really all that you need to do there to get this hooked up and allowed access. So if we go back to getting started, we should be able to now connect to our API and actually make some calls. So some of these examples use curl for just doing it through the command line. But what I would like to do is actually jump into the documentation here in a second, and we'll just go straight to the Node client because that's what most people will probably be using if they're using Next.js. Two other things I want to quickly mention before we get into this is solutions that exist previously. So prior to there being an official Notion API, there was an unofficial Notion API, and there have been a few community solutions out there to work around that and to give you access to Notion right away. So I'm going to pull up a couple of these. The first one was actually made by the Vercel team, and it's just a Notion blog built around that private API. It's a little hacky, and we kind of knew that knowing that this official API was going to come out eventually. But it's interesting to check out and just see how this worked previously, and then to see how it works now with an official API. So you can check this one out, as well as this interesting one, React Notion X, that kind of shows all of the different things that you could do with Notion and all the different different types of embeds or content that you want to show. And the cool thing about this demo is it basically takes Notion, it uses that private API, and it turns it into a Next.js project. And in this example, it's a Next.js project deployed on Vercel. So this is another cool one to check out just to see how it kind of works behind the scenes. This is going to be updated to use the official API as it becomes available. And it's actually sponsored by this project too, which is kind of neat. Super.so, which allows you to do this in kind of a low code or no code way. So you can take a Notion page, drop it in here, and it spits out a Next.js and Vercel project. So if you're not the coding type and maybe you're tuning in just to learn more about Notion, then this could be a good option for you as well too. You can throw custom domains in here. But I'm going to assume that most of y'all who are tuning in today are the coding type. You want to learn more about Next.js. And yeah, now we are in the actual developer documentation. And we have a few different things that we can do here. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Hopefully it's easy enough to read. On the left, we have databases, pages, and blocks. So if we go back over to our Notion page, we're looking at this database. So we have different rows in our database, essentially like a table. And we have pages. So clicking into one of the rows of this database, we have this is a page. So here's the title of the page. You could have some properties on the page, like who the author is, and then the actual content of that page, some rich text, essentially. And finally, there are block objects. So this is kind of the big call out or caveat with Notion API right now. It is in beta. And right now, the blocks that are supported are paragraphs, bulleted list items, numbered list items, toggles to do, and pages. So if you're trying to get kind of one-to-one parity with what exists in the Notion API, what exists on Notion right now, it's not going to be there yet, but it's coming very, very soon. So I would expect by the time that this hits a stable production release, we'll have the ability to basically get all these different types of blocks, whether you want to do images or tables or all sorts of fun stuff inside here. So they're making a lot of good progress there. Okay, so first things first, let's try actually connecting to a database inside of our code. So if you notice here on the left, it gives you a code snippet for the Notion SDK for JavaScript. And this is perfect. So what I want to do, first things first, is we're going to need to install this package. I'm going to go down to my terminal. I'm using Yarn, so I'll just do yarn add. Give me a little more space here. Add that package. I will use yarn dev to start up my local dev server. And that's running on localhost 3000. Make this a little bit bigger for y'all. So if I go to localhost 3000, I should see my new application. Amazing. So we see our Hello World Next.js application. We are started on our dev server. And specifically, I'm looking at an API route. And this API route allows you to add some backend functionality to your application. So if I go to the left and I look at my folder structure, I have pages and then a folder API and then a file hello. So if I navigate to localhost 3000/API/hello, this structure is actually mimicking the file system-based routing of Next.js. So if I hit this API, you'll see that I get back this 200 status code with some JSON response of a name of hello. So this is kind of setting the base for what we want to do with connecting to Notion. So let's go back to here. We want to retrieve a database. So I'll just copy some of this code that they give us and go up to the top here, copy this in. Oh, I need that import statement too. So at the top, we're going to import the Notion client. We create a new client based on this environment variable. So process.env.notion API key. If you remember from a minute ago, I added this to a .env.local. And you can actually see when you start up your server, there's a message in here, loaded env from .env.local. So you know that it's actually picking up those values. So we create a new client. This code snippet is a top level await in like a Node.js script. We actually don't need to do that, but we can steal this part and just get rid of this. And then the default export of a API route will have access to a request and a response. So we're going to make some promise. We're making some requests to an API, which means this is going to be asynchronous. So we mark this function as asynchronous, and then we can paste the code inside here. So there's some database ID. I actually already fetched this ahead of time and put it as an environment variable. If this is wrong, I might have to change it, but we'll see if this works. So Notion underscore database ID. Let's do that. Process.env.notion database ID. So we connect to our Notion client, we talk to our databases, and we retrieve a specific database with this ID, and we get back some response. So let's see what we're working with here. So let me pull this over a little bit. So I connected to the Notion client, and I returned a JSON of the response that I get back. So since we're seeing some output here, it's working, which is amazing. So that actually worked very smooth. I'm glad that there was no issues. So shout out to the Notion team for making that pretty painless. We get back an object of a database. We have the ID, when it was created, and then we see down below, it's called my library. What else do we have in here? Different properties. We have the author property. We have the name property. Okay, so we're just getting some information back about this database. Cool. I think what we want to do is actually query this database to get a list of all of the different books that are going to be inside of my library. So if I pull this back over, here's another code snippet. I'll just copy this over and then we'll inspect it a little bit further. But it looks like we go to Notion, we go to databases, so query instead of retrieve. We have some database ID, and then we have the option to filter things. We could sort things. It's interesting. For now, we probably don't need any of that. So I can probably remove that. Let's save and let's see what we're working with now. So now we get a list back. We're not getting back the full database. We're getting back a list of items that are inside of this database. So if I scroll down, we have this page and the name, the design of everyday things. Awesome. I don't see anything for the author because I'm pretty sure I haven't actually filled it out. I don't remember what the author is actually. Author is Don Norman. So add that information to Notion. I will refresh this. Amazing. So inside of author, we see this rich text or plain text of Don Norman. So I could bold that or I could italicize that. That would be the different options for rich text. See all these different things here. So that's really nice that it gives you the flexibility to do that. So now that we've connected to our database and we have this set up as an API route, let's actually take some data and put something on the screen. So dive into the React code. Now, the nice thing about API routes and why I like kind of prototyping here as I'm building things out is this code runs in Node. So it's running on the server, which is why I'm able to use these environment variables and securely connect to external services. So I'm not exposing this secret to the browser to where somebody could steal it and do some kind of damaging thing to my database. So that's the nice thing about this. And inside of Next.js, if I just pull up the index page I'll go back to localhost 3000, so this index page, and reduce the font size a little bit here. And I'll just change this. I'll say Notion plus Next.js. Hit save and see that React Fast refresh. Boom. Updates everything really quickly without having to reload the browser or anything like that. Love that. Super, super handy. So let's delete this. Well, we could keep the grid. The grid could be kind of fun. So we have these different cards, it looks like, in the grid. Each one, documentation, learn, examples, deploy. I'm going to remove, let's see, get started by editing. Yeah, I'm going to remove the first 3 cards, or the last 3, I should say. And then we're going to want to put the books, essentially, as different cards on top of this page. So as I was saying, the special sauce about Next.js that I really enjoy is inside of this page, we have this function called getStaticProps. And we have this function getStaticProps, and it allows us to fetch some data. So it's an asynchronous function as well. And this data can be fetched on the server again, so just like the API route, and forwarded along to the React component. So if I go back to our API route, I can actually take this piece, and if I'm going to make this production ready, we'll say, I would probably abstract this out into some kind of library folder if I'm sharing this between multiple places. But for the sake of this, I can just use it like this. Also on the server, you have the require imports. You can do either one, but I'm going to change this to import client from Notion client. I create the client again. Yep. And then inside getStaticProps, I have this response, fetch the databases, and then what I want to return are some props. And these props are going to be forwarded to the React component. So let's call this, let's call this response for now. We'll just leave it, we'll leave it as this. Oh, whoops. So used to typing default that had multiple defaults. Export default, export async function. There we go. Definitely not the default export for that one. So now we should forward response to our component. So if we go up to this component home, inside of here, we can destructure the props and we can say response. I might rename this, but we'll leave it as this. And I'll just log this out to make sure we're actually getting something. And I can pull up the browser console here. I see an object and we have liftoff. So we have some results, which is a list. So let's rename response to books. Let's call it books. And go back down to the bottom, we'll change this to books. And it looks like what we really want is response.results. And that gives us this array of one object. So now that we have that array, let's go back into this grid and let me just pull this over to the side here. We have this A tag, which is linking out to the specific page. I'm just going to cut this. And inside of this grid, we're going to iterate over those books. So we're going to map over the different books. And each one is going to render an A tag. Now, a little thing with React is that when we're looping over arrays, we want to make sure that we have a key so that React understands how to dedupe or tell the difference between these different items when re-rendering. So the key for this one will be like book.id. If we had TypeScript, we could get some autocomplete there, but yeah, it looks like book.id. Cool. And then this, let's keep that arrow. The arrow is cool. This would be This would be like book dot, looks like properties. And I'm just checking the console output right here to see what we're working with. We have name, title. Okay, book, properties, so the different properties of the page, name, title, it's an array. So the first item in that array, and then plain underscore text. Actually, I don't think I even need to do a string there. I can do dot notation. Okay, that looks all right. We'll see if it blows up in my face. Of course it does. Books. Can't find books. Map of undefined. Did I rename something wrong? Let's see. Oh, I think I need to refresh the page because the cache content from get static props was looking at books. So that worked my first try, which is incredible. Things never work on the first try, right? It's always a little bit of trial and error. So we have the design of everyday things, and then down below, let's do the author. So book, properties, author. Yeah, book, properties, author. It's probably not, it might be title. I might have to log that out again and see what we're working with, but yeah, of course it's not. Another thing I could do, which could be kind of interesting, rather than just console logging, is I already have the API route. So I could just go over here and see the same content at API/hello. Could be kind of fun. I have a Chrome extension. I saw somebody ask about this, so sorry I didn't pull it up, but somebody asked about the Chrome extension. It's called JSON Viewer, so it just allows you to kind of pretty print out this JSON. So yeah, author, properties, author, and it looks like we can go directly to rich text and then plain text. So I'll go back to localhost 3000. And we have content. We have content on the screen. We're reading the title of the book and we're reading the author of the book. So let's make this a little better. Let's put some other content inside of this library. Some other books that I've read recently. The Almanac of Naval was pretty good. To Sell It's Human was pretty good. Johnny Ives' book, who was basically leading human interface design at Apple, was pretty good. I don't remember the authors of all these, so I'll just do author. Have any book recommendations? Throw them out in the chat. I'm open to getting some new books in my library. So I should see all these pop up here now. Amazing. We have multiple books. Nice. That actually worked out pretty smooth. Kind of surprised by how easy it is to work with. I'm excited to see the rest of this roll out. Before we get too far into this stream, I want to make sure that we deploy our application. So what I'm going to do actually is just kill my dev server. And I have a Git repository right here, Notion API Next.js on my public GitHub, that just has the initial commit from Create Next app. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, I'll get rid of this change. Well, I'll leave it. I have all the different changes, including the package JSON, a small change to the README, nothing too crazy. So I'll say hook up Next.js app to Notion API. I really like the built-in Git support inside of VS Code. It's really convenient for me. So I can just hit like Command Enter to commit and then Command Shift P to push to origin. which is kind of nice. So that pushed up my changes. If I go over to GitHub, I refresh the page. I see these new changes, hook up Next.js app to Notion API. Awesome. Yeah, this dev server isn't going. I'm going to go over to Vercel and actually deploy this outside of a URL that I can interact with. So Vercel.com, I'm on my personal account, just my hobby account. I'm going to import this project for the Notion API. So we'll call it Notion API Next.js. It's using Next.js, auto-detected. By the way, this is our new project deployment flow. So check it out. Give me any feedback you have on the UI, the UX, really anything here. And let me know what you think. But as I deploy this, I also want to throw on 2 environment variables in here, the Notion API key and the database ID. So I'm going to add these in here. Okay. And yeah, I think that's really all we need. We can hit deploy and kick this thing off and let it go out to production. The reason why I wanted to do this is essentially so that I can show you what it looks like when we make updates as part of this workflow process. And then 2, I'll show you a really cool feature of Next.js that will allow you to update this content without having to redeploy your website, which I think we all love, makes things faster. So we have fetched our source code. We have skipped using the build cache. It's the first time. We are building our application, and I will quickly check the chat and see how everyone's doing. Yeah, you can add environment variables to a project using the Vercel command line as well. Thanks for the book recommendation. I will check that out. You're not late. We're just having fun, and we'll have time for Q&A as well too. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know Firefox had that built in. My project is deployed, so that took less than a minute, which is awesome. And if I go out to the URL, notion-api.nextjs.vercel.app, I see all my different books that are reading from Notion. So that was pretty painless to get that deployed. I can open up my dashboard to see this project. And now I want to do the really cool thing that some of you might be familiar with. But if I go into my application and I go into get static props, down here at the bottom, we can tell Next.js to essentially periodically check for new content. So you're going to be updating content in Notion all the time, probably, whether you're storing books or you're storing blog posts or whatever you want to store there. And ideally, you don't want to have to go through that whole deployment process again when you add or update content or you tweak things. So we can use this revalidate property, and I'll just put it as 1 second for demonstrative purposes. And let me just commit this really quick. So we added this revalidate property of 1 second, and this is using something called incremental static regeneration. I wrote a blog post on this. I've also made a video on this. So if you're interested, check out my channel. There's more details on this that goes way more in depth than I will today. But for all intents and purposes, what you can think of this today as, I want to update content in Notion and I want to see it live immediately. I don't want to have to wait for anything. So it looks like we just redeployed our application over here at Notion API Next.js app. That took probably like 20 seconds, which is awesome. So we have this here. It's deployed, it's live in production. Let's go back over to the library and I will add another book. My new book. The author is Lee Robinson. I should write a book one day. That would be fun. That sounds like a lot of work though. I don't think I'm ready for that amount of work, but a Next.js book would be cool. And I go back over to here. And the great thing is that I can refresh and immediately see that new content. So no redeploy needed. I see my new book that I've wrote. I'm sure it's going to be great, but I still have to write it yet. It makes the process so smooth. I really enjoy using that. Definitely check that out if you're interested. Okay, so that was deploying. I'm going to pause for a minute and check the chat. I see there's some questions in here, and then I will go back to showing off a couple other interesting examples. Yeah, I'm really excited to see all the different content that people are creating with the Notion API. This is the first of many, I'm sure, from me as well too. Let me pull up the chat here. Oh, one thing I thought would be kind of fun to show. I'll just do an interlude here, but check out this Vercel keyboard. It's kind of cool. The Vercel keys. I mean, we all love this sound, right? The mechanical keyboard sound. So satisfying. So satisfying. Really love it. The value from get static props is fetched during compilation. Yep. So that runs during build time, and it goes to Notion, fetches the information about your books or whatever you want. And then if you use that revalidate prop, you can also fetch it, for example, after 60 seconds or after a second of stale content. So yeah, you can really use Notion as a CMS with this rather than just a place where you store your notes or your, internal knowledge base for your company. Yeah, we really love ISR. Notion, I would say it doesn't necessarily replace something, but it can be your place to store your content. So your personal list, your company list, any sort of written content, essentially. Thank you for the shout out to Vercel. This is a good question. I'm not sure if there's a rate limit on the Notion API. I haven't seen this in the documentation yet. If there is, feel free to drop that below. Yeah, don't worry about this one. I will be deleting those keys after this stream. I feel like it's easier to actually show the whole process than to try to hide that piece, just because people want to see every step I'm going through. So yeah, I'll swap out those keys afterwards. What else? Muy bien. Thank you. Appreciate everyone joining. Yeah, looks like the chat caught my mistake before I did, and also knew that revalidate was a great option. JSON viewer is that extension. I'm glad that I've got the music level down to. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay. People like the keyboard. We might give away another one. I'm pretty sure there's another one somewhere. So maybe we'll give that out at the Next.js conf. I think that'd be kind of cool. Okay. Feel free to drop any more questions in the chat as I continue along, but I just wanted to make sure I had a chance to talk through some of those. Because I quickly mentioned it too, I'll just mention, if you haven't already, go check out nextjs.org/conf. And we're going to have this conference on June 15th. I've already logged in, but you can see the real-time cursors here of people interacting on the page. So if you join this live right now, I can probably see your cursor if you get a chat, and I'll see you be able to chat. So you can, once you authenticate with GitHub, you can press / to say hello and drop in and leave messages. So I've had a lot of fun with this. Just give a quick shout out to the oh my gosh. That's hilarious. Live stream. I had so much fun with this when we announced the conference, just seeing people swarming around, asking questions. I really enjoy it. Plus, you can actually change your ticket inside of here and get different colors. So you get silver if you attended last year's conference. And then there's a special exclusive gold ticket that we will explain later. But this is awesome. So fun seeing you all join in live here. Yeah, really excited to talk more about real-time collaboration at Next.js Conf. Some really exciting stuff coming up here that's going to change how we work with Next.js and really improve that workflow. Yeah, super excited. So I won't rant on about that too much, but thanks for joining live on that. Check out nextjs.org/conf if you haven't. The next thing I wanted to talk about was we talked about looking at something like a library, but I think a lot of people are interested in something like a blog. A lot of people trying to transform that. So I have a really awesome example that I can pull up. And yeah, did realize those are real people. Yes, they're all 100% real, 100% real-time chats. Super, super fun. We might be giving away one of those keyboards, by the way. We shall see. But I wanted to give a quick shout out to Samuel here, who made this really cool Notion blog with Next.js. That's all completely open source that I took a look at, and it's really nice. It's even got some good styling in here. And it's a very similar setup to what I've already done so far. So it fetches data with the Notion API, plus it actually renders some of the different blocks. And it looks like right now we have lists, we have headings, to-do lists, toggles. We're still missing, I mentioned this at the start, but we're still missing a couple things like images and code snippets. I'm really excited for that to land soon. I see that, yeah, somebody mentioned that in here as well. Really excited for that to land soon, because that will make, that will complete the swing for being able to use this as a blog. I would expect that to be done by the time they launch it to a public stable. But yeah, this is a really good example. I just wanted to show this up on the screen and also dig into the code a little bit. I'll include this in the description for everyone to check out, but it's using a very similar setup. So it's already been abstracted out into a library folder where we have importing a client, setting up a client with an auth token, querying a database and returning the results. So very, very similar setup. Getting a specific page based on an ID, and then also getting the individual blocks. Somebody just mentioned share this in the chat, so I will share this in the chat as well. But the cool thing about this block one is it allows you to get kind of complete control over how you render these on the page. So if you go into pages and then ID, we're going to see the actual blog posts. We can probably see specifically how they've managed to make this work. So render block, given a block, if it's a paragraph, use a p tag. If it's a heading, use an h1, heading 2, h2. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Bulleted lists, numbered lists, to-do, toggle. This is really good. It's even got unsupported type or unsupported blocks too. And it looks like it uses this text component, which handles bold, code, italic, strike through, underline, the different properties of rich text that are available from the API, allowing you to apply slightly different styles. So this is pretty neat. I've actually also went ahead and cloned the Notion database that it uses behind the scenes, just to give you an idea of what this looks like. So we have this blog, and this is actually the content of what we're looking at here in this example. We have 3 different posts and a database, again, very similar. And I can open up each one of these as a page. There's different page properties at the top if I want to fill them out. And yeah, then all of this is the rich text that's coming from the Notion API saying that this is a heading, this is bold, strike through, italic, code, all of these different things. And then notice there's a table block in here, which is unsupported. So if I go back to here, I can pull up the example and let's pull this up. So notice right here, it says unsupported block for the table. So I would expect all of these blocks to land pretty soon, but this is a great example of how you can make all this work. So shout out to Samuel, great job here. If you have any other Next.js Notion examples that you've seen that are starting to do some interesting things with the API, feel free to send them over to me. I'd love to check them out, because I'm really interested to dive more into what we can do retrieving specific blocks of children. Because when you look at the identifiers for the blocks, this is where you actually differentiate between a paragraph, a list item, a numbered list item, and all those different options. So this will make it pretty easy to set up a blog and to set up a template. We'll probably provide a template for this just to make it super easy to allow you to deploy your blog, have a free CMS essentially, and then easily write code that has code snippets or bold or italic or all sorts of different things. So that is the majority of what I wanted to talk about today for the Notion API specifically. But I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to ask or answer any questions that you have about Notion, about Next.js, about me, about anything in general for the rest of the hour. And I'll be here to hang out and hang around and answer any of those different questions. So with that being said, I will jump into the chat. React Notion X is pretty cool. I enjoy that. I'm excited to see that move over to the official API as well too. And to get this set up with some kind of deployable starter kit will be really nice. I shared this in the chat to see that example that I just pulled up on the screen. So check that out if you're interested. My stream setup. I have a Sony DSLR camera that I actually use for photography that I now hook into my computer so that I can use it for my streams. Just gives a little bit better video quality, but you don't necessarily need that. If you are interested in streaming, I would recommend jumping out there with whatever gear you have. Really, the key is lighting. So I have two different lights. I have one up here and I have one up here, and I have this one back here, the Vercel light that really helps make things look really good. Is there internationalization in Notion? That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that one. Thank you. Appreciate that. You can absolutely use Next.js for a lot of the different things that you might have previously used Create React app for. We'll be revealing a little bit more information here, but we're essentially making it as easy as possible for people to migrate from Create React app to Next.js, as seamless as hopefully possible. So stay tuned for that. We'll probably talk about something around that at Next.js Conf. We do have plans to do built-in nested layouts like Svelte. Stay tuned on my channel because I'm doing a live stream on using Svelte Kit on Vercel in probably 2 weeks, I would say. I'm going to try to do one a week. We'll see. So this week was Notion Next.js. Also, feel free to tweet me if you have questions or ideas for different streams to do. The web cursor on nextjs.org/conf is actually using Replicache is the technology that we're using. We'll be writing a blog post on specifically how we built that and how it all works, which I'll share on my Twitter once we finish that. Let me scroll up. Does Notion have issue tracking? You can use it as a pseudo issue tracker similar to Jira. I've done a few different projects inside of Notion entirely because it also has the Kanban style board or like the burn down charts that you get with something like a Jira, but you can absolutely use this in replacement of that. Also check out Linear if you're interested in a really nice Jira replacement. Super cool product. Best place to learn Next.js, nextjs.org/learn has the official tutorial on how to get started that we constantly update with the latest stuff. Hi from Ecuador. Thanks for joining. Can't wait for the conference. I'm super excited. Really, really excited. It may or may not have something to do with this question. I can confirm nor deny that. Let's see, I answered this one about Notion and internationalization. If somebody has any information on the rate limit with Notion, that'd be helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just moved into the head of developer relations at Vercel. So I'll be growing my team. If you're interested in joining the Vercel team, check out vercel.com/careers. We have a a few different roles open right now. Yeah, Notion isn't really, it isn't a relational database or a NoSQL style database. It's abstract. It's like a layer of abstraction higher. Like under the hood, you're not having to worry about how they provide that database for you, kind of like Google Sheets or Excel, right? Like it really is a database, but you don't have to think about that. You're not writing SQL queries, for example. Yeah, so the benefits of that would be the interface in which you're interacting with your content. You can absolutely store content inside of a relational database, a blog post, but then you're having to kind of roll your own system for rich text or potentially store it as Markdown and then process it back when you're reading that. Next.js to the moon. Yeah, Notion is definitely production ready as a product. It's being used all over the world. The API is still in beta, but should hopefully be in production soon, I would think. I also love Prisma. Prisma is excellent. Yep, yeah, with this API, you can now kind of programmatically extend Notion, create themes, plugins, all sorts of stuff. So a developer relations manager is kind of what I am, I guess. I'm not really a manager per se. Like I will be managing a team and helping grow the team. But first and foremost, I'm just trying to ensure that the people in the Next.js community and the customers of Vercel have their voices heard. They have a great experience with the products, a great experience with Next.js, and I get to help educate. I get to do these live streams. I get to teach you all anything and everything that you're curious about around web development. So if you do have suggestions, I'm always open. So yes, thank you. Appreciate that. I think I've made it up to the top of the questions. Awesome. I'm doing excellent. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you're still hanging around. I know this was back at the beginning of the hour. And it looks like there's some new questions down below. Will there be a Notion CMS integration with Vercel? Yes, this is something I would really like to see to automate the process of creating that integration, like as you deploy, picking out a page and setting up the permissions on it, and then essentially fetching those values and putting them back as environment variables on your project. Thank you. Thank you for joining the live stream, and I'm also looking forward to the conference. What would be a good fit for an e-commerce tech stack along with Next.js? There's really a lot of options here, but I will say that we've tried to create a pretty comprehensive all-in-one starter for e-commerce applications at nextjs.org/commerce. So this uses Next.js. It uses all the best practices to get you set up with a good base for building your e-commerce project. It works with BigCommerce and Shopify, and there's a few others in the works right now. Like there's one where you can actually use Google Sheets as your product database if you want. So I would recommend checking that out. Another one that's interesting to check out is hull.dev, HULL.dev. It uses Sanity along with Next.js, and it's got a really nice design. So yeah. The docs for Next.js are open source if you want to check them out. The actual source code for the conference isn't, but we will be releasing a blog on how we built it. I do have a video on internationalization with Next.js if you're curious. It's on my channel if you want to check it out. Yes, it is possible to get single page application like loads when routing using Next.js. If you are struggling with this, feel free to send me a message. But essentially, when you use a vanilla A tag on the web, you're doing a full page reload or a hard reload. Like you're going from one route, myblog.com to myblog.com/new post. When you use Next.js's link component, it allows you to do those single page like client side transitions, which is just a fancy way of saying like page navigations. to where it feels instant. It feels like you're part of that same application, while behind the scenes, you're actually still going to that new URL on the server. 30-minute Next.js conference rumor. So it's not a rumor, it's true. The bulk of this special Next.js conference, which will be on June 15th, should be about 30 minutes, followed by an hour live stream from me where it'll be like an after party hanging out. I'll bring the speakers on, we'll answer questions, all that sorts of fun stuff. There's 4 speakers. Like I said, it's just a special event. The speakers are on the website. This fall, there will be another conference that will be the full conference with more speakers and the ability to submit if you want to speak and all that fun stuff. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Do I recommend Firebase for e-commerce projects? You could. If you're familiar with Firebase already, you could absolutely do this since it's providing you a place to store your products and to store your prices and all that information. There's also a Stripe extension for Firebase, which I have talked about previously. If you check out my course, React 2025, react2025.com, it's all free and on my YouTube channel, and it shows you how to use that extension with Firebase. This works pretty well. Some people have more specific e-commerce needs around the checkout solution they use or how they manage quantity or inventory. But for something small, you could absolutely use Firebase. Yeah, the role for my team, the two roles that are open right now for the DevRel team at Vercel is a developer advocate as well as a community manager. So the developer advocate is someone like myself who likes making examples, they like interacting with the community, they like helping solve customers' problems and educating on Next.js and Vercel. And the community manager is someone who will be interacting with the larger community across Twitter and Discord, Stack Overflow, email, Facebook, I don't know. Wherever people are at, the community manager will help shape the vision of how these communities grow and how to interact with people. So those are the 2 roles open right now. I once self-hosted a Next.js site with Docker. Curious to know other ways to self-host Next.js apps. So there's really 2 ways to self-host Next.js applications. You can either run a node server, so deploy anywhere that has a server, and you just run next start to start your application, and it's pretty much as simple as that. Everything will work out of the box. The other option is if you actually want to containerize your application, so using Docker, and you're still using next start, but you're actually running it inside of some kind of container like Docker. I have a video on this on my channel if you want to see how to use Docker, and there's also documentation on this as well too. I guess the third option too is you can do a completely static site with Next export and put it wherever you want. For the older programmers here, you could FTP it to your server, or you can drag and drop it to your server somewhere, or you can put it on GitHub pages or wherever you want to be. Any idea for an ISR blog apps like Medium? Yeah, it would be really interesting to take kind of what we've started today or what we've seen with how you can build a platform on top of some kind of API like Notion or another backend, but then extending it to add authentication using something like NextAuth and different accounts so that I can have lead.myapp.com or the different options there. So like a Medium or a Substack or something like that could be interesting. Is it a good design to expose a REST API using Spring Boot to integrate with Next.js? Yeah, the great thing about Next.js is that it doesn't really care where your data comes from. We've seen people use Next.js with pretty much any backend or API you could imagine, whether that's a Spring Boot API, it's a C# API, it is pretty much anything you want. is there a version of the virtual event starter kit that uses Wistia instead of YouTube? For context, the virtual event starter kit was our open sourced version of the last Next.js conference to allow people to host their own online conferences. And yeah, it uses YouTube for the embedded video process. There isn't a version specifically for Wistia, but it should be pretty simple to change that out if that's something you're interested in. Any plans to support wildcard domains on Vercel without changing name servers? Yeah, I'm not sure if you mean on a domain that you own or on, like, let's say I own leerob.io and I have it hosted elsewhere, and then I want to have blog.leerob.io only on Vercel and not the actual root domain. That is something that we plan on supporting if that's what you're talking about. The music is at the start of the video comes from StreamYard. The video throughout the rest, or the music throughout the rest, is from Spotify, a playlist called Stream Beats. Yeah, Next auth is super easy. I did a video on my channel, if you're curious, using Next auth to build a Netflix clone using Next.js. So if you want to see the process of hooking that up with a Google OAuth login, I would recommend checking that out. It's pretty straightforward. It's nice. It looks like we've actually hit the hour mark, so I'm going to wrap this up. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined in today and watched me work with the Notion API live. Thank you for all the questions. There was lots of good ones. I really appreciate it. One final shout out to Next.js conference. So go to nextjs.org/conf if you want to learn more about the future of Next.js, and join my live stream after the event, the after party, where I'll be emceeing and bringing the speakers on to talk about all sorts of things. So yeah, thank you everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Really appreciate it. Bye everyone.